Let's be brutally honest right now. That's a big question.
I'm looking for someone who doesn't want to go to base camp, but they want to go to the very top.
Whether it's here, India, New York.
Civilization was born at happy hour.
That's what wins. That's what stands out. That's what people are interested in. That's what I want to know. The Hospopreneurs Podcast with James Henderson. Hello and welcome to episode 122 of the Hospopreneurs Podcast. Samantha Wong is a partner at Blackbird Ventures, a technology venture capital fund with $1 billion in funds under management. Blackbird was an early investor in some of Australia's biggest startup successes, Canva, Zoox and CultureAmp to name a few. More recently, the fund invested in Fable Food Co. You may remember Michael Fox, the founder, on the program at episode 106, and the future of food is one of Sam's investment areas of interest, which is why I reached out. Prior to joining Blackbird, Sam was a startup founder, product manager with multinational e-commerce startup surfstitch.com, and a corporate lawyer with Minter Ellison. Hello and welcome to the show, Sam.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me on the show. I'm glad we could make it happen.
It's an absolute pleasure. I'm really looking forward to getting into the interview today with you. You've made some interesting and exciting decisions recently with regards to innovative food companies, and one in particular I've interviewed the founder of, so I'd love to hear your perspective on what's going on there at the moment, anything you can share too. That is, of course, Mr. Michael Fox. How did you come in contact with Michael?
Oh, wow. That's actually quite a long story and predates Fable. I actually first met Michael when he had started Shoes of Prey. He had actually a blog that I was a follower of or a reader of. And that was at the beginning of my startup journey. I joined a startup called Surfstitch back in 2010, I think it was. So 10 years ago now. And there just wasn't very much online, and particularly not written by Australians, around how to build digital businesses. And he was very open about all the experiments that he was running on, at that time, I think Google and email marketing and performance marketing generally. And I was a student. I was teaching myself digital marketing for the job I had gotten at Surfstitch. It wasn't my training. I was a lawyer by background. So I got to know him through that blog and through the online retail kind of scene at that point in time. So we crossed paths a few times. I think I actually maybe even pitched him to give me a job at one point. Anyway, and then subsequently I joined Blackbird Ventures, which is a venture capital fund in which actually backed Shoes of Prey along their journey. I joined sort of 2015, so well after the investment was made, which was wonderful to be a part of that journey for a very brief amount of time. And then as he was thinking about what might come next after Shoes of Prey and knew that I was looking at alternative protein, we started a very healthy kind of back and forth dialogue about where opportunities might be. And it's just been fabulous seeing him go out and give it another go. He's a rare and wonderful talent, and it's an awesome product. So hopefully that gives you a flavor, no pun intended.
Thank you so much for sharing that background as well. Michael was a very interesting and exciting guest to have on the show. Anyone who's interested and who has not heard that, Michael was episode 106. Very interesting. And Fable is, of course, an alternative meat company. And I mentioned there in the intro, if you haven't heard of Fable yet, you will soon. So 100% really interesting company to check out. And Michael Fox is a fantastic guy. He's a great guy. I really like that guy. Before I ask a little bit more about what you're doing and what Blackbird is, for those who haven't heard of Blackbird, I'd love to hear your crazy hospitality story or exceptional hospitality experience, Sam.
Yeah, so I guess a recent one that stands up in my mind is actually a stay at the M Social Hotel in Auckland last October. And it's so rare these days actually to just have a noteworthy hotel stay. But this was sort of noteworthy, I guess, because, I had a baby 4 months prior and I was traveling internationally for the first time. I was living in Sydney then, and it was for our conference. We put a conference on every year for around 1,000 people. And I was speaking and I was quite nervous and I wasn't getting a lot of sleep. And it was a very stressful kind of period. And we were announcing our fund and opening the office in Auckland. So it was a very big event. And I was traveling with my 4-month-old and my partner. And they were just so amazingly accommodating. Like every day I would pop down to reception with a bunch of dirty bottles and be like, do you mind sterilizing these for me? And every day they just smiled and were so understanding and thoughtful. And when you're traveling with a young child, it just made so much of a difference to kind of face that instead of like grumpy faces or just a lack of accommodation on that front. But I think probably my most memorable hospitality memory is I when I was sort of going through a quarter life crisis and left law and just about to enter into startups, I was on a sailing trip with some friends, which makes us sound like really posh and fancy, but we weren't. It was a bareboat charter of quite a small boat for about 10 people, but two of our friends were, reasonably competent skippers. And so we chartered this boat in Croatia before it was really fancy and cool. And one of my friends was Croatian and spoke Croatian. And it was probably about halfway through our trip and we'd run out of all the fresh food that we had brought and were counting on. And I think we were planning to moor somewhere, but the swell was too crazy. So we had to find another place to take shelter. And we found this island called Bishovo with a population of 30. And on the map, it actually tells you the population size. And we were like, let's hope they have food because we have no food and it's too late and the swell is too crazy now to try and get to a bigger place. And so it turns out this island does indeed only have 30 people, and that's really including the children. So there's like 10 adults or something that live on the island. And we're pulling into this tiny bay and we can see lights and nothing else. And we pull in and they have this little veranda patio looking area, and like literally the whole town, 30 people are sitting on this big wooden table under this patio with some music playing and a whole bunch of Calavaco beer bottles on a table and bowls. And it's like about 8 p.m. or something like that. And it's dark and we kind of rock up. And fortunately, our friend speaks Croatian and they sort of peered into this giant pot that they had on a fire. And there was some dregs of their soup that they had for dinner left. And they patted it out with a bunch more veggies and threw some more pasta in there. And it was like a very simple, rustic kind of bean soup with Croatian sausage with a bit of pasta and whatever they could rummage together, because they just had no food, no shops, nothing. And we had nothing. And then they pulled up some chairs and allowed us to join them. And that just stands out in my mind as this amazing, warm, human experience of sharing what little you have with total strangers, knowing very well the next morning they would be gone. But yeah, that really stands out as like a beautiful, wonderful, memorable experience and actually surprisingly delicious.
What a beautiful story. I really like that one, Sam. Thank you for sharing that one.
It was nice to remember it, actually.
Yeah, it's good that obviously your friend spoke Croatian and lucky that these people were accommodating. I'm really glad that you had that exceptional hospitality experience. How warm and friendly and beautiful of an experience to have, Sam. You mentioned there that you worked with Surf Stitch and then you were working in the legal profession and then you've gone up to startup land. What did that journey look like for you and how did you then find yourself doing Blackbird?
I'll try and tie it together as quickly and neatly as I can. So I never really wanted to be a lawyer like most people, but I got the marks to get in. I didn't really know what else I wanted to do. So I did it. And if you do reasonably well, before you know it, you wake up and you're a lawyer and that's your career. But I was always doing stuff on the side. And I loved online media was like emerging at this point in time. So this is like the 08, 09 era. And I was dabbling with some like online media stuff with some friends who actually subsequently went and worked at YouTube. And actually one of the first ones was like sort of actually predated sort of Time Out and Broadsheet and all that. And it was like a daily newsletter and we would go out and cover like new hospitality openings and new events and stuff like that. I just loved online, just the experience of what you could do online, of the discovery that was possible. And I just felt like before I let the golden handcuffs get fastened for good, I just had to explore that. And so I took a leave of absence. I negotiated like 1 year to leave my law job in 2010. And I gave myself 1 year basically to replace my salary. I moved home with my mom and spoke to everyone I could and asked anyone who worked in online whether I could have a job. And I was willing to work for free to prove myself. And yeah, so I took 2 part-time jobs at startups and 1 retail job because I actually really thought I liked retail. I learned, well, I kind of do, but I won't go into that. But yeah, and Surf Stitch was the one that kind of worked out. Like I started as a temporary gig in SEO marketing and turned into email marketing and turned into product management within 3 months. So I was a product manager. Obviously, wasn't really a product manager. You don't learn product management in 3 months, but I was attempting to be a product manager. And then I went to Europe for 2 years and launched the European business over there. At that point, I felt like my learning had plateaued and I wanted to start my own thing. So I came back to Australia and started a startup, which got into the StartMate Accelerator, which is owned by Blackbird and run by Nikki Shabak, who is a co-founder of Blackbird Ventures, venture capital fund that I'm now a partner in. And yeah, so between startups in around 2015, Nikki suggested I might join as their first hire to do a bit of everything really, as first hires tend to do, which I did and was one of the best decisions of my life. And yeah, 5 years on, partner, I moved to Auckland at the beginning of the year to launch our New Zealand fund and head up our New Zealand office. And yeah, just not slowing down, not looking back.
Yes, wonderful. And what a story. And thank you for putting it succinctly there. I'd love to elaborate for listeners a little bit more on raising capital. And we kind of have this cursory sort of glance over a lot of these topics. What does it actually look like to be working at a VC fund?
So it's a lot of meetings and it's a lot of email, and unfortunately it's a lot of saying no. The thing that's like non-obvious from the outside, and I can say this with my founder kind of experience as well, is that you think that if you're good enough, if your pitch is good enough, it's a yes and you get investment. And what I now know, now that I'm on the inside, is that it's such a tiny proportion of companies that actually get investment from a particular fund. And every fund has a particular lens on the world, just as every founder has their particular lens on the world. They have a set of beliefs, a set of preferences, a set of intuitions, and a set of values or about how they'd like to spend their time and the sort of people they want to spend their time with. And each fund, there are different strategies. The odds are that you are speaking to, if you're a founder pitching a partner, that fund is meant to last sort of 2 to 3 years. So it's meant to invest over 2 to 3 years and make around 20 to 25 investments. And you probably have a few partners investing over that fund. And so when you break down the numbers, that partner only has to do 2 to 3 investments a year. But that partner is meeting many people every day who all want investment. So the funnel narrows from like hundreds of meetings a year to 2 to 3 decisions a year to go on a 10-year journey with that founder.
And those founders that are pitching funds, they're taking them elsewhere. The people with the cream of the crop, they could be picked up by any fund, really. Any of the big ones all see that opportunity, surely. But we do hear stories about people saying no to some of the best ideas out there and best businesses and best people.
Absolutely. There are so many examples of great companies that got missed. And often it's not a belief that they're not great or that they're not the cream of the crop. It's just not their belief system. So I'll give you, a great example is we believe in investing in businesses that are global from the very beginning. So we want to see founders serving customers all around the world from the very beginning. There are some businesses that just cannot be built like that. One's in regulated industries, for instance. So fintech is not something we touch because you basically have to build it country by country in order to comply with licensing laws. And there are amazing fintech companies, Afterpay, Zip, any number of household names that we missed because it's just not in our mandate, it's not in our belief system. And that's fine because there are other investors who do not have those restrictions. But it's really hard to understand that when you're a founder. The no feels so personal to you when it's probably not personal at all to your company.
Yeah. Sam, you mentioned there that there are different strategies that VCs can take on when they are looking for those things. And it sounds like you might have touched on something there where you say that, say, Blackbird just looks at companies that are global from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Is that part of that strategy? Or what are some ideas for people out there who are trying to understand the VC landscape, what it actually looks like in terms of those different strategies that those businesses might have?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about Blackbird. So global is definitely one of them. The belief is that we want to back founder-led companies. So it's not unusual to see companies founded by some product-centric folks or technical folks, people who can actually build the first version of the product, whether it's software or hardware, and then want to bring in, say, an MBA or sales and marketing type of person to actually become the CEO and scale the company. That is a perfectly legitimate way of building a business, but it's not our preferred style of investing. We are really excited to find product-centric people and help them, surround them with the people who can help them develop in those areas where they do not have natural talent, and to see them lead those companies to become really big, successful companies, like the most successful and valuable companies in the world to a large degree are founder product-led companies with CEOs who were unqualified to be CEOs. They may not have finished uni, they may not have ever even worked for someone else before, and they have developed into people who can run businesses worth hundreds of billions of dollars. And that's the journey we're excited to go on. So that's another example. Another's around about sales models. So a lot of funds love doing B2B or enterprise software, for instance, and that's typically sold by salespeople over a phone, maybe even a meeting over months. Definitely a science to that kind of sales. It's not our preferred mode of selling. We think the internet is an amazing democratizing force. And if you have a good enough product at an approachable price point, people will just discover you online. Like Canva is a classic example. Discover you through an SEO search for best menu design, discover the template, start using the product. become addicted towards it, want to share it with others, or want to upgrade to access certain features and convert into a paying customer. And that's the kind of growth that we love investing in as well. And these are just all personal biases and preferences, and different firms will believe different things about the world and reflect that in their investment style.
You mentioned Canva there. Just to elaborate for listeners, tell us about some of your success stories through Blackbird.
Yeah, sure. Blackbird, I guess, started in 2012. 2013 was when the first investment was made. And I think the first check actually was in Canva. And Canva actually held open their seed round for Blackbird to do its first close on the funds. That was very lucky. And that fund is largely software as a service, so businesses. So some really standout companies there would be Canva, Safety Culture, which is safety and quality checklist software, CultureAmp, it's an employee engagement culture survey platform, Schedulo for remote workforce team organizations, lots of awesome companies in the software vein in that fund. And then we also invested in an autonomous vehicle company called Zoox, which sold to Amazon this year. And then that sort of introduced us to investing not purely in software, but in all sorts of deep tech areas. So robotics is an area we love. And after Zoox, we invested in a LiDAR company called Baraha. We've invested in some space companies, so Gilmore Space, Fleet. We've also invested heavily into alternative protein, touched on with Fable. In our latest fund, about 25% of the investments we've made have been in alternative protein, and also AI, particularly in healthcare. We love the opportunities in that space. So we're pretty agnostic as to technology. It needs to be a technology product business, but we are really open to being challenged on what the next great wave will be. You can't just focus on what you know. You have to keep looking ahead to the next 10 years and what could be big on that kind of horizon.
To elaborate on that one a little more as well, you constantly have to be removing any ego associated with what you might think there, because ultimately the consumer really drives that with consumption. But how much of it is the business actually defining the market, where you have some sorts of examples where founders have gone, this is a need that people don't know they need yet, and then they create the business and people go, oh, actually I need that. Is that a matter of making people want it or discovering a need for it? Or is it that the consumer actually did want it all along?
Oh, that's such a big question. Look, I do think that there are some founders who are exceptional at identifying what people want that people themselves don't know they want. But it is really, the go-to-market for that is incredibly hard because we're all so distracted. How do you get people to lift their eyes up from where they're focused to pay attention to your ad or pay attention to wherever it is that you're trying to find their attention and actually try you? And then you need to do that enough times to iterate on your crappy first version of the product to actually get to the point of getting enough feedback to make the crappy first version a good version. So look, those product geniuses do exist in the world who just nail it somehow from the beginning, but it's incredibly rare. Look, I live in hope of finding those people, but it is incredibly rare. The more kind of predictable path is someone with a very deep insight into a problem and how to solve that problem, and then also how to get to market and how to acquire customers in a differentiated way. Like almost no idea is unique. Every founder thinks their idea is unique, but I can tell you when you're seeing hundreds of ideas a year, it's very rare to hear a truly unique idea. But what tends to be unique is the expression of, I guess, the founder's insight in how the product is designed and how you take it to market. So who your first customers will be, what language you need to use to get them to respond and try you. All of those things are an indication of the founder's connection to the problem and your unique quality, I suppose, or your qualification to solve the problem in a sea of competitors.
Sam, you mentioned a little bit earlier about alternative meats and your investment in that space. You said 25% of that fund is looking at alternative meats. Tell us about what you're seeing in the future of that particular industry. What's actually going on there? Because you're on relatively ground floor level. Like, I imagine that these founders have something. Maybe they're just pitching an idea and they need some serious capital to actually roll it out. But in terms of actually what's required in that industry and the future of it, what are you seeing or possibly predicting?
I think the stats pretty well accepted at this point that the population growth over the next couple of decades is such that we just cannot produce enough meat to feed that population. It's just impossible. We already use 40% of the world's earth for livestock production. And these 1.5 billion people or whatever that we're going to add need to live somewhere too. And it's also showing up in the economics of meat. Even if you take away the shortages that were caused due to COVID, the prices of all meat other than chicken, which has been flat, has been going up over the last decade. So that indicates that there are no more efficiencies to be found, notwithstanding the heavy industrialization of our meat industries. And that combination of demand increase from an aging population, a growing global population, and an increasingly affluent population, combined with the scarcity of being able to produce more without correspondingly increasing cost, is a great area for technology to try and provide solutions. And those solutions can be really varied. Some of those solutions might be plant-based protein, and that is now quite a mainstream category and is starting to reach levels of scale production, although I think it's nowhere near where it ultimately will get. But there are, I believe, and this is debatable, different people have different opinions, there are limitations on what you can do with plants from a texture and taste perspective. We have known how to grow cells and tissue for a very long time. This is not novel. We have been doing this in medicine for a very long time. The challenge has been no one has ever had to create tons and tons heart cartilage or heart tissue before. And so it's actually a scaling up challenge. And so that's why I'm quite interested in the potential for that technology to solve this problem. And of course, you're not trying to engineer a plant to behave like, a meat cell from an animal. It is a cell from an animal. And so it can more readily, I think, have those characteristics of meat that we know and love. And I think the other thing is, this is a slightly strange way of thinking about it, but what we love in software products and when software companies pitch us, we're actually not always very interested or not as interested in revenue as they would think. We're really interested in engagement, and we'll ask lots of questions around how frequently a user uses the product. And basically the thesis is if you love a product, you use it really regularly, you're never going to stop using that product. It'll just be part of your budget, part of your spend, as long as you have, that problem to solve. And I think that there are certain categories of food where that is true. And coffee is a great example, right? It's a daily addiction for millions of people around the world. They are just never going to stop drinking it. I mean, it is literally addictive. And I think there are some forms of protein. So milk could be one of them. Probably in the West, chicken breast is another, where it's like basically a daily addiction. And if you love that product, it is going to be in your shopping basket, or it is going to be on your plate 3, 4, 5 times a week. And it's going to be there for decades of your existence. And so that is potentially a very powerful kind of relationship that a company can have with its customers.
These people who are going to operate the businesses as well, these founder operators, founder product managers, you said founder product manager, is that the correct term that you used as well?
A sort of product-centric founder, yeah.
Product-centric founder, perfect. So when you're looking for these founders as well, more generally, are you looking for them to be playing into the trend, or someone who is, maybe this is going to be reflective of the position that Blackbird takes, or you personally, maybe you have your own sort of lens on it. Are you looking for people who are a little more disruptive, or people who are playing into a trend?
We're in the business for really big outcomes on a 10-year horizon. It's really difficult to invest in something once it's already a trend and still expect it to grow 100x from that point. Timing is really important. You can be too early, for sure. And if you're too early, that's not always fatal. It's fatal if the company can't raise enough money to just keep going, basically just stay alive until the wave catches, I suppose. Yeah, timing is everything. We're generally not very responsive to someone identifying a trend but having no kind of connection to it or no particular reason why they will execute better than the next person who has identified the trend. Again, it comes back to, are they doing their life's work? What are their unique insights into how to develop the product and bring it to market? That will mean that they have an outsized chance of succeeding amongst very low probabilities. I think the other thing that people don't really realize is like venture capital is all about really big outcomes, not certain outcomes. We're really happy to lose our money on about 50% of the deals we do. It just matters that if they succeed wildly and pay back all the losses.
Sam, you mentioned there with product-centric founders that you're looking for those people to be in there specifically in front of you pitching to get to raise the capital they need to then build it. How then do you navigate the situation where that founder doesn't fit to be the person rolling out the growth of the business?
This is really tricky. Part of what we try to do is surround the founder with the help that they can use to help them grow with the business. And I would say that is the case more times than not in our portfolio, although if you kind of zoom out, that's probably not typically the case in Silicon Valley. These processes tend to be pretty organic. It sounds more dramatic than you would imagine. And it's basically because the founder finds themselves doing things that are de-energizing and that they don't enjoy. You start off in the business, as you alluded to, identifying a problem, iterating on a product, scaling that product, hiring the team, building culture, scaling or developing your go-to-market. And then at some point, it actually, quite often turns into a business about scaling sales. And the founder finds themselves spending all their time thinking about how to hire sales reps, how to motivate and compensate sales reps, partnership deals, and all these things that if you're a deep product person, you may not find all that fun and not all that energizing. And you may have the potential to be great at it if you really dedicate yourself to it, but actually realize you don't want to. And that realization usually happens over, years, I would say, and can be a really organic and can be actually a really healthy and positive experience. And we have a portfolio company that did that transition really successfully. And over the course of a year, did a CEO search for someone who was really excited to basically own the sales and marketing function and lead the company through that next phase of growth. And the founder was a part of that decision and selected the person who they would, work with as chief product officer as opposed to being CEO. And that's the best, outcome you can ask for, right? You get the insights and the empathy of the product-centric founder in the business, and you get the person who really loves building a sales engine, leading the company. So yeah, it can be a really organic and positive process, but it so much depends on the type of company and the situation.
Yes, excellent. And what an insightful answer. I really appreciate you sharing that one, Sam. So thank you for that. My question for you next is, what is it that you're learning about or exploring at the moment?
What I wish I had more time to learn about and explore actually is it feeds into the supply chain of alternative protein companies, but not just alternative protein companies. Lots of companies that are basically producing chemicals through fermentation processes. There's just a bottleneck with production there, and it's the main reason why we don't have clean meat today, and that is like a volume and cost challenge, and it will be solved over the next couple of years. And I'm excited to invest in those sort of enabling technologies. I don't know what it looks like yet. I'm doing the work and I'm meeting the companies to kind of work that out. But that's something I'm thinking about. The other thing that I've been thinking about is, I think we're probably all at this point tired of hearing the phrase, the future of work, with the whole COVID work from home situation. I actually don't think the future looks as different as people are making out, but I think what will be different is how we measure work. I think when you take away the FaceTime way of measuring whether someone's productive or someone's engaged or what have you, managers will have to find some other way of managing effectiveness. And it's actually crazy if you think about it, that we've gotten to this stage of development and we don't really do that. And so I'm interested in companies, software companies that are developing solutions for that, measuring of productivity, and not just desk workers or office workers, lots of different types of fields. But I think that's something I'm interested in.
With more of a focus on sustainability, on health and wellness even, what do those metrics for measuring productivity look like in the future that you're imagining? I'm not sure if you've had something come across your desk that does do this, and maybe that's why it's at the front of your mind there. But is there something there that you're thinking of that is going to be an interesting metric that you think will be a more foundational piece in that conversation?
I don't think I've gotten to, I could think of examples in certain industries, but I don't know what it looks like, I guess, holistically at a product level. And I think it's a really challenging problem, but it has the potential, at least I'm thinking of white collar work, to be such a positive force overall. How many people start a job without a clear idea of what success looks like? What are they meant to deliver at day 30, day 60, day 90? Do they really know what their performance is going to be measured on? Do managers really know how to frame that? Do they know how that actually even folds into the company's overall metrics for success? And then how do we gather that data? How do we observe and feed that into company planning? I don't know what it looks like yet. I just know that it's a problem, and when people cannot see the work that others are doing, they're going to need to see evidence of work somewhere. And that is going to make it much more objective and data-driven, and it's going to be really obvious when people are doing busy work, not work that actually feeds the bottom line or whatever it is that the KPI is that the company is prioritizing. And hopefully it actually leads to a whole lot of better management where it's really clear what the goals are for the whole organization. They are well articulated, jobs are well structured, managers give great feedback because they have the right insights to direct their reports and guide them. No, you're working on that, not that. Or I see that you dropped in productivity this week because of this. Or do you want to talk about why that is? What can we do to, help with that? A lot of the time, it's not people's work life that is holding them back. It's something else. But we don't have any mechanism for talking about that right now or for folding that into management. So yeah, like I said, I don't know what it looks like. I just know that I'm excited about people who want to solve that problem because these problems have always existed, but we're in this period right now where the future has come forward and is a catalyst for people to actually make a purchasing decision because they now recognize they have a problem and they need a solution.
That is interesting. Essentially, there are a lot of moving parts to that. I'd love to open that up with you another time. I think we could spend the rest of the interview just talking about that.
Be better off when we have an investment to anchor it.
Yes, thank you for sharing that one, Sam, as well. For the next question, I actually have something around creativity. How much do you contribute to the actual creative direction, creative development of and products of these businesses that you invest in? Do you take a sort of arm's length perspective on that and give that freedom and flexibility to the founders? Or is it something that you like to have a lot of involvement in?
Oh, I'm definitely the former. Everybody loves to spitball and share their opinions, but just because we have an opinion doesn't mean it's right. Our job is not to build businesses. Our job is to back brilliant people who want to build big businesses. It's really, really important not to get carried away with making investments because you're excited to work on that problem or you're excited to work on that product. Obviously, is part of the decision, but it shouldn't be the reason to invest. And it's a great process, especially when you invest as early as we do, to kind of brainstorm with founders and introduce them to people who can help them refine their vision or test some things. But ultimately, it's their business. We succeed if they succeed, and it's not our job to get in there and tell them how to execute.
When you're working through these sorts of creative problems, what are the sorts of abstract problems that you deal with in your role? What do those sorts of problems look like in your position? And then how do you work through those? And it's not just adopt a creative mindset, but how do you work through that with this creative lens?
Oh, that's a big question. The problems are so varied, but again, we invest early stage, and because of the way we invest as well, we invest in product people. So we're not helping them solve the product problems in terms of like how to build it. It's typically people-based problems. What is the right sort of first salesperson, or what is the right kind of growth marketer that I need for my particular product in my particular market? How do I build a culture that is like this, but not this? I have no employer brand. I don't have a lot of money to hire people with. I do have equity, but no one values that yet. How do I entice the most talented people to take pay cuts and come and work on this mission? Those are the challenges we work on. Go-to-market strategies. I'm working with a company right now on an awesome problem, which is, they have a product that is typically a very chunky top-down sale. They have an idea for how to do a freemium style customer acquisition strategy. And we're literally like brainstorming, how do we execute that? How do we get in front of these people? These particular customers, very busy, time-poor people who are not digital workers. So they're not sitting there reading email or cruising Facebook or anything. How do we get in front of them? And it's a really fun brainstorming activity. And then it's, okay, these are a bunch of ideas. We need to hire someone to execute on this. Again, this has never been done before or by any company. So we can't go and hire someone who's done it before because those people don't exist. We have to find people who maybe have a background that might lend itself to doing this kind of experimental marketing. And that gives you a sense, hopefully, of the kind of problems that we work on with founders.
Yes. And so you're obviously empowering the founders to go out and solve those problems rather than hand holding and doing it and then going, okay, we've done that for you. How do you then inject that into a founder who may be lacking? Maybe they're 2 years in. You said some of those investments are 3 years. What happens if, say, they're a couple of years in, they're losing a bit of that steam? Maybe it's too specific a circumstance. I'm just wondering what you normally do through that process in terms of actually inspiring founders to fulfill on those objectives that you designed together.
Oh, look, they set the plan and they execute on it. And they typically know where they're struggling. And we introduce them to the people who have solved those problems before. The way we built Blackbird is founders helping founders. There are first 100 investors in Blackbird were technology founders. They help us source investments, vet investments, but also then help the companies that we've invested in. And now we've done 67 investments, and through the StartMed Accelerator, hundreds more. And so in the network, there is either at the founder level or the people those founders have hired, someone who can share their experience or network to help you solve that problem. And our job is just to put those people in front of the founders to solve that problem. I think it's a myth that, because you've done something before, you're better qualified to do it again. A lot of investors love the idea of backing second, third time founders who've been successful before. We are not as bullish that is a surefire way to success because, one, some of the most valuable companies in the world today were founded by first time founders. And what the most important thing is hunger to succeed and hunger to learn. And if you have had success before, you're potentially not very hungry anymore. You kind of happier to settle for a middling outcome rather than a wow, shoot the lights out outcome. And the best founders are just hungry for learning and they just never stop. They're never satisfied and they're always curious and wanting to keep developing themselves and pushing themselves. And that is a quality that we look for intently when we make our investment decision. We're not really assessing people on where they are now. We're sort of assessing people on the distance traveled so far in their life. Do they have the capacity to learn a lot, to develop quickly? Are they ambitious? And how do they respond to success? And then we're making a prediction on how they will react to all the different challenges that will confront them and making a bet that they will be able to scale the high walls, particularly if we put them in the path of people who have scaled that wall or ones like it before and can point out where the traps might be and where the fast routes. I think my analogies are falling down here, but I think you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I do. Thank you. I'm really glad that I probed a little bit more with that question because there was a lot of really interesting commentary in there that elaborated on that. So thank you, Sam, because I think there's a lot more to it when you are investing in these people. They have to be people that you're backing for a long period of time. You're giving them a lot of money for a long period of time and hoping that they deliver on that. I was interested to hear a little bit more about what you do in those circumstances. So thank you. I just have one last question for you today, Sam, just to round it out, wrap it up. Who would you like to hear on the show?
I think someone from Air New Zealand would be great. I'm very intrigued and interested to hear that story told myself because from what I understand, it was like a really incredible corporate turnaround story and really about building an iconic brand, and their marketing feels very fresh. And I joined their kind of frequent flyer program when I moved to New Zealand, and I subscribed, so I get their newsletters, and their honesty with customers is really refreshing. And I would find that one a very interesting one. And I also think even someone who operates or owns an airport would be really interesting because these are actually like shopping malls, but with a captive audience. But yet you can make that a really awesome experience. And I can think of a lot of bad airports, but I think it would be really cool to find someone who operates a really great airport and cover that.
It's fantastic. And airports would be a very unique property to manage and or own there because some people at the airport are spending hours there. They've got heaps of time. They're like, oh man, I've got 3 hours, 5 hours or till my flight.
I've slept overnight on an airport floor. I think I spent 13 hours in an airport once.
Crazy, right? And then other people would they're just looking at their watch going, 10 minutes, I've got to be on this plane. So it could be they're super time poor or they've got plenty of time. So I wonder how that would really look in terms of actually designing the space and what that sort of format looks like.
And also just the complexity of it, right? Like it's maybe second to hospitals or something like that in terms of the actual operational complexity that you're dealing with. You think about terrorism risk, obviously biohazard or type risk, immigration, regulation, and so on, and just the complexity of these enormous machines moving around. And then on top of that, you have to create a delightful experience and run a profitable real estate business. I don't know, maybe it's exceptionally nerdy of me, but I think that there could be some interesting stories to be told there.
Thank you very much, Sam, for joining me on the program today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and it's super exciting for all the things that you're doing. I'm very excited to see what the future holds. So thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks, James.
This program is hosted by James Henderson, with technical production by Jake Olver. Voiceovers were by Angus Brennan and Shim Phelan. Thanks to our distribution team, and a special thanks to you for tuning in every week. This program was produced by H Media. We'll see you soon.